Biclustering system. The biclustering system is built around the concept of identifying submatrices within a larger data matrix. It is composed of two primary components, bicluster mixin and bicluster, both of which are designed to perform biclustering operations on datasets. Bicluster mixin. The bicluster mixin is an abstract class that defines the basic structure and methods for performing biclustering operations. It provides core functionality like fitting the model to data, retrieving cluster indices, and obtaining submatrices. Fit. The fit method is responsible for training the biclustering model on the input dataset. It learns the underlying bicluster structure from the data and stores relevant information for subsequent operations. Get indices. This method retrieves the indices of rows and columns belonging to a specific bicluster, allowing access to the corresponding submatrix. Get shape. Retrieves the dimensions of a specific bicluster, providing insights into the size of the corresponding submatrix. Get submatrix. Extracts a submatrix from the original dataset, corresponding to the specified bicluster. Get clusters. Returns the clusters biclusters identified by the model. N clusters. The number of biclusters discovered by the model. N features. The number of features columns in the original dataset. Bicluster mixin acts as a foundation for the concrete bicluster class, providing the essential framework for biclustering operations. It defines the common interface and core methods that are inherited and extended by the bicluster class. Bicluster. The bicluster class implements the concrete biclustering logic, building upon the bicluster mixin. It inherits the core functionality from the mixin and adds specific attributes and methods to address the details of the biclustering process. In it, the constructor initializes the bicluster object, setting up the basic parameters and data structures required for biclustering. Fit. Fits the biclustering model to the data, employing specific algorithms and techniques to identify the biclusters. Get indices. Retrieves the indices of rows and columns belonging to a specific bicluster, allowing access to the corresponding submatrix. Get shape. Retrieves the dimensions of a specific bicluster, providing insights into the size of the corresponding submatrix. Get submatrix. Extracts a submatrix from the original dataset, corresponding to the specified bicluster. Get clusters. Returns the clusters biclusters identified by the model. N clusters. The number of biclusters discovered by the model. N features. The number of features columns in the original dataset. N samples. The number of samples rows in the original dataset. Rows. A matrix representing the rows associated with each bicluster. Columns. A matrix representing the columns associated with each bicluster. Data. The original dataset used for biclustering. Bicluster inherits the functionality of bicluster mixin, extending it with additional attributes and methods specific to the biclustering process. It leverages the core methods defined in the mixin, but provides a more complete implementation tailored for specific biclustering tasks. Data flows through the system in the following manner. The original dataset is provided as input to the bicluster class. This dataset is then processed by the fit method of the bicluster class, which utilizes the algorithms defined within the class to identify biclusters. The results of this process are stored in the attributes of the bicluster class, including N clusters, rows, columns, and data. These attributes allow the user to access information about the biclusters and their corresponding submatrices. Methods like get indices, get shape, and get submatrix enable the user to extract specific information about the identified biclusters. and access the data within them. Control flow starts when a user calls the fit method of the ByCluster class, providing the input dataset. This initiates the ByClustering process, where the ByCluster class, using the inherited methods from ByCluster mixin, analyzes the dataset and identifies ByClusters. After the fitting process is complete, control is returned to the user, enabling them to access the results through various methods provided by the ByCluster class, allowing for further analysis and utilization of the ByClusters. sklearn, base, classifier mixin, a subclass of base estimator that implements the methods to fit the data and predict the class. Labels. Fit. Train the classifier using the provided data. X. Array-like of shape and samples, N features, the training input samples. Y. Array-like of shape and samples, the target values. Predict. Predict the class labels for the provided data. X. Array-like of shape and samples, N features, the input samples. Y. PRED. ND array of shape and samples, predicted class labels. Score. Return the mean accuracy on the given test data and labels. X. Array-like of shape and samples, N features, the input samples. Y. Array-like of shape and samples, the target values. Sample weight. Array-like of shape and samples, default none, sample weights. Score. Float. The mean accuracy on the given test data and labels. Predict proba. Returns the probability of the sample for each class in the model. X. Array-like of shape and samples, N features, the input samples. Y. PRED proba. ND array of shape and samples, N classes, probability estimates for each class. Predict log proba. Returns the log probability of the sample for each class in the model. X. Array-like of shape and samples, N features, the input samples. Y. PRED log proba. ND array of shape and samples, N classes, log of probability estimates for each class. Decision function. Computes the decision function of the samples. X. Array-like of shape and samples, N features, the input samples. Decision function. ND array of shape and samples, the decision function of the samples. Represents a class in the sklearn library that provides functionalities for clustering data. Fitx, unan. Fits the clustering model to the input data X. It learns the cluster structure and updates the model's internal parameters. Labels. A list or array that assigns a cluster label to each data point in X. N clusters. The number of clusters that the model has identified in the data. N features in. The number of features in the input data X. Feature names N. The names of the features in the input data X. Fit predictix, unan. Fits the model to the data and then returns the cluster labels for each data point. Labels. A list or array that assigns a cluster label to each data point in X. N clusters. The number of clusters that the model has identified in the data. N features in. The number of features in the input data X. Feature names N. The names of the features in the input data X. Get params deep true. Returns a dictionary of the model's parameters. Set params params. Sets the model's parameters to the values specified in the params dictionary. A list or array that assigns a cluster label to each data point in X. Fitx, unan. The fit function determines the cluster labels based on the input data X. Fit predictix, unan. The fit predict function determines the cluster labels based on the input data X. The number of clusters that the model has identified in the data. Fitx, unan. The fit function determines the number of clusters based on the input data X. Fit predictix, unan. The fit predict function determines the number of clusters based on the input data x. The number of features in the input data x. Fitx, unan. The fit function determines the number of features based on the input data x. Fit predictix, unan. The fit predict function determines the number of features based on the input data x. The names of the features in the input data x. Fitx, unan. The fit function determines the feature names based on the input data x. Fit predictix, unan. The fit predict function determines the feature names based on the input data x. Sklearn base regressor mixin. The core of the system is the sklearn base regressor mixin, which represents a fundamental foundation for regression models in machine learning. In itself, args, quargs. The constructor initializes the regressor mixin object, setting up the initial state and configuring its parameters. Initialization. Fitx, y, sample weight none. Data flow. The constructor prepares the model for training by defining the input and output variables. Fitx, y, sample weight none. This method trains the regression model using the provided data features x and target values y. Training. Predictix. Data flow. The trained model is used to make predictions on new data. Predictix. Given new input features x, this method generates predictions based on the trained model. Prediction. Score x, y, sample weight none. Data flow. The predictions are passed to the score method for evaluation. This method assesses the model's performance by calculating a score, typically r², which reflects the goodness of fit between predictions and actual values. Evaluation. Get params deep true. Data flow. The score is calculated based on the predictions and the actual target values. Get params deep true. This method retrieves all the parameters of the estimator, including those that are not directly accessible through the object's attributes. Parameter retrieval. Set params. Data flow. The retrieved parameters can be used for inspection or to configure the model. Set params. This method allows modifying the parameters of the estimator by providing a dictionary of parameter names and their new values. Parameter setting. Tags classifier, regression, multi-output, multi-class, multi-output binary. Data flow. The updated parameters are applied to the estimator. Tags classifier, regression, multi-output, multi-class, multi-output binary. This attribute defines the tags or categories that classify the estimator. These tags help organize and categorize models within the scikit-learn ecosystem. Tagging. sklearn, base, transformer mixin. A base class for all transformers in scikit-learn. It defines the interface for fit, transform, and fit transform methods, which are used to learn the transformation from the data and apply it to new data. It also defines attributes for accessing information about the data. Methods. Defines the core functionality of a transformer. Fit. Learns the transformation from the training data. Transform. Applies the learned transformation to new data. Fit transform. Combines the fit and transform steps into one. Get params. Retrieves the parameters of the transformer. Set params. Sets the parameters of the transformer. Attributes. Provides information about the data being transformed. N features in. The number of features in the input data. Feature names in. The names of the features in the input data. N outputs. The number of outputs after transformation. Feature names out. The names of the features in the output data. N features out. The number of features in the output data. sklearn, base, Method estimator mixin. This represents a method estimator in sklearn, which is an estimator that wraps around other estimators. Base estimator. This component encapsulates the core functionality of a standard estimator. Fitx, Y. Trains the estimator using the given input data X and target labels Y. Score X, Y. Evaluates the estimator's performance on given data. PredictX. Predicts the output for new data X based on the trained model. PredictProbX. Predicts the probability of each class for new data X in classification tasks. Decision function X. Provides the raw decision function for new data X, often used in binary classification. Method estimator methods. This component provides methods specific to method estimators, allowing them to manage and combine other estimators. Fitx, Y. Trains the method estimator, often by fitting its underlying estimators. Fitx, Y. A core fit method, potentially called by the main fit method. FitEstimators X, Y. Fits the underlying base estimators of the method estimator. Fit transformers X, Y. Fits any transformers within the method estimator, if applicable. Fit single estimator X, Y. Fits a single base estimator. Score X, Y. Evaluates the method estimator's performance, potentially considering its underlying estimators. PredictX. Predicts output using the trained method estimator, leveraging its underlying estimators. PredictProbX. Predicts probability of each class using the trained method estimator. Decision function X. Provides the decision function using the trained method estimator. GetArgSklearn. Retrieves tags for the method estimator, useful for introspection. More tags. A dictionary of additional tags associated with the method estimator. Method estimator methods. Base estimator. The method estimator methods component typically uses the base estimator's functionality for core operations like fitting and predicting. Method estimator methods. Base estimator. The method estimator methods component often manages and orchestrates multiple base estimator instances, leveraging their strengths to achieve a combined result. Input data X, Y. Method estimator methods. The method estimator receives input data for training. Method estimator methods. Base estimator. The method estimator passes input data to its underlying base estimators for training. Base estimator. Method estimator methods. Base estimators may return predictions, scores, or other results to the method estimator. Method estimator methods. Output. The method estimator provides its final output, often based on the combined results of its base estimators. User. Method estimator methods. The user initiates the training process, providing data to the method estimator. Method estimator methods. Base estimator. The method estimator directs the training of its underlying base estimators. Base estimator. Method estimator methods. Base estimators inform the method estimator about their training progress or completion. Method estimator methods. User. The method estimator provides the trained model and results to the user. sklearn. Base. Outlier mixin. A class that provides methods for identifying outliers in data. Fitx. Unan. Fits the estimator to the data and determines outliers. Determines outliers and updates the estimator's internal state. Fit PredictX. Fits the estimator to the data and determines outliers, returning an array of labels. Returns an array with outlier labels -1 for outlier, 1 for inlier. PredictX. Predicts outlier labels for new data. Returns an array with outlier labels -1 for outlier, 1 for inlier. Fitx. Unan. Internal method for fitting the estimator. Updates the estimator's internal state. Predictix. Internal method for predicting outlier labels. Returns an array with outlier labels -1 for outlier, 1 for inlier. Fitix, unan. Determines outliers and updates the estimator's internal state. Output. Fit predictix. Returns an array with outlier labels -1 for outlier, 1 for inlier. Output. Predictix. Returns an array with outlier labels -1 for outlier, 1 for inlier. Output. Fitix, unan. Updates the estimator's internal state. Output. Predictix. Returns an array with outlier labels -1 for outlier, 1 for inlier. Output. Init. Initializes the class, potentially passing arguments to a parent class. Parent class. Inheritance. Inherits methods from a parent class. Set output feature names. Sets the output feature names. Set output feature names. Internal call. Calls a helper method to perform internal operations related to feature names. Get feature names out. Retrieves the names of the output features. Get feature names out. Internal call. Calls a helper method to retrieve stored feature names. A mixin class providing functionality to manage output feature names. The core cloning functionality within sklearn provides the foundation for cloning models and pipelines. Base estimator relies on clone utilizers. The base class for all estimators in sklearn defines essential methods for model training, parameter management, and cloning. Clone provides methods used by user, is accessed by, implements the core cloning logic for models and pipelines, handles different cloning scenarios by leveraging methods provided by base estimator. Base estimator uses methods provided by sklearn base clone, implements the functionality of the user of the sklearn library, triggers cloning operations on models and pipelines. Base estimator interacts with sklearn base is regressor. This system checks if an estimator is a regressor. Input. The input to the system is an estimator object. Receives the estimator object to be evaluated. Method check. This component checks if the estimator has certain required methods. Verifies the presence of fit, predict, and score methods with specific scoring parameters. Fit method check. This subcomponent checks if the estimator has a fit method. Verifies the presence of the fit method. Predict method check. This subcomponent checks if the estimator has a predict method. Verifies the presence of the predict method. Score method check. This subcomponent checks if the estimator has a score method with the appropriate scoring parameter. Verifies the presence of the score method with scoring none or scoring R2. Predict proba method check. This subcomponent checks if the estimator has a predict proba method. Verifies the presence of the predict proba method. Decision. This component decides if the estimator is a regressor. Determines if all required methods are present. If true, the estimator is classified as a regressor. True condition. This subcomponent is triggered if all required methods are present. Returns true if all required methods are present. False condition. This subcomponent is triggered if any required method is missing. Returns false if any required method is missing. Output. The output of the system is a Boolean value indicating whether the estimator is a regressor. Outputs true if the estimator is a regressor and false otherwise. Input. Method check. Estimator object. Method check. Decision. Boolean value indicating if all methods are present. Decision. Output. Boolean value indicating whether the estimator is a regressor. Input. Method check. Estimator object received. Method check. Decision. All methods are present. Decision. True condition. Estimator is a regressor. Decision. False condition. Estimator is not a regressor. True condition. Output. True. False condition. Output. False.